Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Massive thanks to the authors, Roxi2Star and ThatOneZed for allowing me to adapt their awesome story. Follow the link in the description to check out more of their works. Today we will be listening to the 19th part of What If Deku Had Both One for All and All for One. If you enjoy, please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing down below, and don't forget to hit that bell icon so you get notified when videos go live. Now, without further ado, let's get into the video. Chapter 38, It Was His Father's Voice. Chapter by Roxi2Star. 2 days prior. Night 3. Pain. That was the first thing Izuku's body registered as he came back into consciousness, the throbbing pain that reverberated through his whole body. His head was screaming and his left arm hurt so badly he thought he might be sick. He was sure he had other injuries, but he couldn't for the life of him remember what they were. He went to rub his eyes. His hands were bound. Izuku's eyes snapped open. He was in a bar, seated in a chair bolted to a chair. His ankles were strapped down, as were his thighs. A metal piece went over his waist, keeping his back pressed to the metal chair he was sitting in. His hands were bound in a metal container, and it was chained between his legs to the chair. He also wasn't alone. Villains, the same ones who'd attacked the camp, were littered around the room. The man with the scars who'd dragged him through the portal, the tall one with the beam that was the reason for his headache, and a few more he hadn't gotten a good look at before. Behind the bar, the misty Kurogiri was polishing some glasses. And closest to him was Shigaraki. "Look at that. Sleeping Beauty finally wakes up," he said, poking Izuku's cheek hard. He hissed, pulling away from his touch. "Welcome home, Izuku." Izuku glared, giving the chains an experimental tug. His broken arm groaned in pain. It was breakable. Maybe if he waited for the right moment, he could snap out of his restraints and make a break for it. "Hi, Izuku," a voice called. Throwing herself in front of Shigaraki was a girl, maybe a year or two older than himself. He might have called her cute, with her messy buns and oversized sweater, but everything about her made him uncomfortable. "Hi," she said again. "I'm Toga Himiko. But call me Himiko-chan, okay? It's way cuter." "Oh my gosh, Izuku, you're so cute. Look at you, you're covered in blood, it's so gross." "I love it." "Himiko, you're scaring him," Shigaraki said. "Ew, but look at him. He's so precious. I wanna cut him up." He laughed at that. "Disgusting." "Oh, I understand. He's got the kind of face you just want to destroy. But Sensei wants us to keep him alive. He's coming tomorrow. He really wants to meet you," Shigaraki said. "But I thought we should introduce you to the gang first. The guild is still a little rocky, but after our raid's huge success, I think we're feeling a lot closer. Alright, introduce yourselves to our newest member." Izuku blinked. Newest member? They were trying to recruit him? Him? He laughed. He couldn't stop himself. He laughed long and hard. "You're insane if you think for a second I'd consider joining you. You just gotta hear us out, Izuku," Shigaraki said. "Sensei implied you'd be a lot happier on our side, so let us help you break your goody two-shoes habits." Hey. This was a sick joke. It had to be. Take him a prisoner to make him join? Pathetic. This couldn't be their whole plan, right? Did they even have a clue who they were dealing with? They kidnapped him. Oh god, Shouto. Shouto and Kikin had been left behind. They must be panicking. And Dad, oh fuck, Dad would be losing his mind. He needed to get out of here and fast. He ran through his quirks. One for all could break the chains, but with a broken arm, he might injure himself too much in the break. Pull, shield, and all for one were useless with his hands like this. Blood curdle maybe? He could bite someone. Oh. That's right. He had a new one. The bear. He closed his eyes, his mind showing him the void of all for one. That's right. A transformation quirk. Turning into the bear would break the chains, and he could rampage right out of here. That hide had been so thick too. He could do this. He tried to focus on the shape of the bear. "Go on, compress you first," Shigaraki ordered, being cut off as Izuku transformed with a loud pop. Well, that's not what he was expecting. Bad news, he wasn't a bear. Good news, he wasn't chained up anymore. His transformation into an animal made him too small for the restraints. Worse news. He was a rabbit. Oh my god, he's a bunny. Himiko squealed, jumping up to hug him. Izuku squeaked, full cowling crackled around his body as he jumped out of the way. Oh. He could use his quirks in this form? And it seemed body damage was reflected too. His front left paw was still broken. He landed on the bar, all the eyes on him. Fucking cheat codes, Shigaraki yelled, grab him. The villain with the scars summoned blue fire from his palms. Izuku used his shield to tank the blast of heat. I said grab him, not kill him, Dabi. Dabi shrugged nonchalantly. My bad. Hands wrapped around Izuku from behind. The lizard villain held him up. I've got you, Stain's chosen one. He cried, my name is Spinner. I'm very happy to be working with the hero my idol has chosen. Izuku squirmed, leaning down and biting his arm. He had to use one for all to do it, but he broke the skin with his sharp rabbit teeth, getting a taste of Spinner's blood. His body immediately froze. He started, I can't move. Oh, so you stole the hero killer's quirk? Shigaraki asked. He has Stainy's quirk. Himiko asked. Oh Izuku, you keep getting better and better. She squealed and made another jump for him. I wanna be inside you so badly. He jumped out of the way, giving one of his back legs a powerful kick, breaking the bar under the air pressure. Himiko, Dabi, Spinner, and Kurogiri were blown back. A villain wearing a scorched mask went to grab at him. Alright. The one who can put people into capsules. Not good. Izuku flipped in the air to avoid him. Suddenly his body shifted, and he was being pulled towards the metal beam. Some sort of magnet quirk? He attempted to orient himself or get away, but his head collided with the metal. The hit reverberated through his body as he shifted back into his normal form. Great work, Big Sis Magni, the masked villain said. He and Dabi hoisted Izuku back up and into the chair, his mind too hazy to stop them. How do we confine him if he can turn into a rabbit? Do we have a cage? Dabi asked, then again he's also got super strength. Just put him back in the restraints, Shigaraki ordered. He'll need a guard at all times. If he uses his quirks again, we hurt him. He smirked. Actually. Let's break his other arm. Dabi shrugged. That'll work. He and the masked villain pulled Izuku's body to the intact half of the bar, and laid out his right arm. Wait. Izuku yelled, his mind clearing somewhat. I'll stop. I'll be good. He struggled in their grip. Please. He broke his arm out of their hold and cradled it to his chest before jumping away and back into the chair. Sorry, he said softly. They all laughed. Oh man, what a cutie, Big Sis Magna said, I really like him. He's funny. She ruffled his hair harshly, making his head hurt worse. He probably had a concussion. He's definitely dizzy enough for it. I'm Big Sis Magni. Your new favorite big sister, she said. She and the masked villain bound him back in his restraints. I am Mr. Compress the Magician, at your service. It's a pleasure, Midoriya Izuku, he said, removing his hat and bowing to him. I hope we might be good friends. They call me Twice. The man in the black and white suit covering his face said nice to meet you. Fuck you. Dabi, the scarred villain said, that's what they call me. His eyes met Izuku's. They were a dazzling shade of blue. Something about them made Izuku's heart stop for a beat. I still can't move. Spinner yelled. Izuku, how long does this last? He hesitated, it depends on your blood type. I haven't gotten a chance to test though. So I'm not sure, he said, when Stain froze me it was only a few minutes. So, not long. Spinner didn't seem upset with that. What an honor, to have Stain's quirk used on me, he whispered to himself. Oh Izu. Let's drink each other's blood. Himiko yelled as she climbed into his lap. It'll be so cool. I'll be frozen for a little while if it means I can drink your blood. I wanna suck it out so bad. She giggled. Hey, can I ask you something? Do you have a girlfriend? I don't have a girlfriend. Yet, 'cause I'm ugly. Twice interjected. He leaned back in the chair. She had the same metallic smell as Stain. This entire place stunk actually. He could smell booze, sweat, blood, dirt, the stench of body odor was suddenly palpable. Did any of these people fucking shower? Izuku's stomach did an unpleasant flip as she leaned forward more, licking her lips. I have a boyfriend, he finally managed. That stopped her. Then her face went impossibly red. Oh. That's so fucking hot, she squealed. Do you top or bottom? You seem like a bottom. Do I know him? Wait, was it that cute guy that almost burnt Mr. Compress? Or the explodey guy that took down Muscular? Mr. Compress laughed. Ah yes. One Todoroki Shouto. He was very displeased with me when I had stolen you, he said. Kept screaming about giving you back as if you were a possession of his. Distasteful if you ask me. Dabi snorted. Poor little Shao. Do you think he threw a tantrum after we stole you away? He asked with a grin. Shit, Shigaraki cursed. It's 1 a.m. I'm gonna be late in meeting my guild, he said. Put the twerp to bed. Dabi, you're in charge of him. What? He asked. Why me? I don't wanna have to. Don't care, he said. Sensei will be here tomorrow night, so make sure he gets rest. Knock him out if you have to. He stood. Well. Time to go play WoW. See ya, losers. Dabi groaned. Twice, help me with the chair. Let's just put him in one of the back rooms and keep an eye on him. Don't tell me what to do. Sure man. Twice said, hey Himiko, mind hopping off his lap? Ah okay Night Izuku. She cooed and pressed a kiss to his cheek before she slipped off his lap. Dabi and Twice struggled to lift his chair but managed to carry him from the main room to a smaller back room in the bar. It looked like a small dirty bedroom, mostly bare aside from a crate with a lamp on it and a very old-looking mattress on the floor. They put him down and turned the light on. Alright. I got it from here. If he moves I'll cook him, but if you hear me screaming. Right. Twice gave him a thumbs up and left the room, closing the door behind him. Leaving Dabi and Izuku alone. Dabi sat back on the mattress with a soft groan. Ugh, I'm beat. You were a real hassle to get, you know that? He asked, looking up at him. Hey, you were with Shouto. Did that bear asshole ever come after you guys? He didn't make it back, so I figured someone got to him. Izuku hesitated before he replied. He did, actually. He really wanted to eat Shouto. I wasn't about to let that happen, so, he said, I kicked his ass and stole his quirk. Good for you, he said. Thanks for that. I hated that guy. Their eyes met. Man, Dabi had some blue eyes. They were almost wait. Izuku sat up straighter in his chair. Even in his foggy mind, he started putting the pieces together. The bear villain had said the kid that ugly freak told me not to kill. But fuck Dabi. He's not in charge of me. Dabi had wanted to keep Shouto alive. Dabi had a fire quirk. He seemed to be around the right age. Wait. He called him Shao. No fucking way, Izuku said softly. What? Dabi asked, sitting up. How old are you? He asked. 23, he said simply. Why? Thank you for being honest. Yeah, that math checks, he said. Another quick question, how do you feel about Endeavor? Dabi stood, his eyes cold. Don't you fucking talk to me about that asshole. I'll kill him. I'll kill you for even bringing up the subject. He leaned down into Izuku's face, blue fire close to his neck. Their eyes locked. Izuku offered up a tired smirk. You know. I spend an awful lot of time staring dreamily into an eye that looks an awful lot like yours. He took a deep breath in. Tya. The look that crossed Dabi's face was almost comical. His eyes widened. Then he kicked Izuku's chair, and he ended up on his side. It was painful with the way he was restrained in the chair, and his head had hit the hard floor. How do you know that fucking name? Shouto's my boyfriend, he said simply. I've been to his house. Damn it, his head was spinning. He looked up at Dabi, and his vision doubled, tears trickling out of his eyes. SS. He tried to speak but his voice became more slurred. So you're Strine, he said and allowed his eyes to close. Fuck, Dabi said softly, and that was all Izuku heard before Izuku blacked out. Night 4. Izuku wasn't sure how long he slept. But when he woke up he was still on his side, and he had to pee. He was also starving. And his throat was dry. And he was alone in the room. He immediately used one for all to break out of the chair. He overexerted his right ankle doing that though, and felt it crack under the pressure of one for all. He ignored the pain. There was so much it was starting to just feel like static. He limped over to the door and tried it. Locked. He rolled his eyes and simply used one for all to pull the whole knob out, breaking the door with a loud crack and getting plaster all over his feet. He pushed the door open and found the hall empty. How stupid were they? Izuku found the bathroom first. Just in case he got caught again, he'd rather not risk pissing his pants, thank you. He got back into the hallway, and a voice called to him. Ah, there you are, Izuku. It was Mr. Compress. I was just coming to get you. He laughed. Glad to see you awake. You slept for nearly 16 hours. You must have needed it. Come now. You have a visitor, he said, and motioned for Izuku to follow. No tricks now. I don't have to compress you, do I? Right. Compress could confine him pretty easily. But, guest? That could only be one person. And Izuku did not want to go. Ah. I see. The hard way then, Compress moved forward, and in a flash Izuku's world went dark again. He didn't know how long he was in there, but the next thing he knew he found himself being flung from the capsule onto the floor. Izuku slowly sat up, looking around. He was back in the bar. The villains were all on one side of the room. All of them lined up against the wall, heads down. Compress joined the lineup, lowering his head. Behind him, Kurogiri stood still behind the bar, with Shigaraki sitting at it. He looked excited, and that gave Izuku the most fear out of everything in the room right now. Danger sense was going off. More than it had ever before. Every single hair on his body was standing up. His head was throbbing. He looked back down at the floor he was sprawled out on. He knew someone else was standing in the room. He didn't want to look. Midoriya Izuku. The voice hit him like a bucket of ice water. That voice. It was so sinister. It made his heart leap into his throat. It was cold and sharp. It was his father's voice. Slow footsteps echoed in the quiet room. Izuku lifted his head. His eyes met sleek black shoes and crisp black slacks that led up lean long legs. A well-tailored suit expanded over a broad chest and shoulders, and an expensive skinny black tie tied everything together. He looked up a little more and his heart jumped. His face was covered by a massive black mask. It seemed to help with his breathing. Izuku wasn't sure. But it scared him all the same. Oh yes, All for One said softly. I was correct. How nice to see you again, Midoriya Izuku. Again? Izuku couldn't move. He couldn't speak. He was frozen to his spot on the floor. Stand up. I wish to get a better look at you. He reached down, and with warm steady hands he pulled Izuku to his feet. He nearly doubled back, but All for One held him up. You're much larger than the last time we met, he said. Then again, you had to have only been 4 or 5. Izuku's eyes widened. He was only 4 at the time. He remembered waking up to his father looking down at him on the bed. He hadn't known it was him at the time. He had stood over him, his eyes cold in the dark of the room. Izuku didn't remember being afraid. His father didn't speak in the memory though, just watched him, before leaning down and ruffling his hair. Izuku remembers smiling at him. Then, his father simply walked out of the room, closing the door behind him. Izuku, he began, I have many questions. Questions I believe you hold all the answers to. I'm sure All Might told you about how he defeated me. 6 years ago, he gave me a horrible injury. Of course, I gave him one in return. His hand went into Izuku's hair, stroking it out of his face. He felt violated. Ever since that incident, my memories have been broken. Parts of me were spirited away. I think you know where they went. He shook in his sneakers. All for One pulled his hair to make him look up. Tears were spilling from his eyes. You have All for One, he said simply. Why is that? You also have one for all. His other hand trailed down Izuku's face. What about the woman with green hair? Do you know about her? His mom? All for One wanted to know about his mom? All for One laughed softly. So you do. He removed the hand from his face and used it to loosen a valve on the back of his mask. I can't be in this state for long, but... Izuku heard a hiss of pressure as the mask pulled away from his face. He lifted it off and placed it on the bar. Izuku recoiled. His face was, well, there wasn't much of a face at all. A mouth, then just, scar tissue. Izuku turned away, his empty stomach spewing bile onto the floor. Not a pretty sight, yes. I know. But necessary. I'd like to try something. I dare think it shall work. He grabbed Izuku's good wrist and pulled it to his face, laying Izuku's hand along the scar tissue. It felt gross under his fingers. Wait. Izuku yelled, trying to pull back, but All for One was stronger than him. His other hand came to rest on Izuku's face. No, he begged, but he pressed down all 5 fingers. The bar disappeared. Suddenly it was only them. Izuku and All for One standing alone together in the center of a black tornado of the void. The only comfort was his quirk swirling around him. However, he could also feel the mass of quirks All for One had acquired as their 2 mind subspaces collided together. Izuku took stock of the man before him. They weren't touching here in the mind space. Just standing close together. All for One wasn't scarred here. No. Here he had a neat head of white hair. An angular jaw, sharp red eyes, and a dusting of freckles. Izuku felt like he might be sick. So. Midoriya Izuku. Show me, who am I to you? An image of his father burned into Izuku's mind against his will. All for One's eyebrows rose in surprise. A long moment passed where they just stood staring at each other, the only noise being the swirl of power around them. Finally All for One laughed. He pulled away from Izuku. They were back in the bar, and All for One dropped him to the floor. Izuku's head was pounding. He let out a sob and curled in on himself. All his quirks were still accounted for at least, but this was his father. This man who both felt the same and entirely different from Midoriya Hisashi. Tamura, All for One said, drawing the attention of everyone in the bar. What an incredible thing you've found for yourself here. Do you know what this boy is? Shigaraki didn't move. What is he, sensei? He asked quietly. All for One grabbed Izuku by his hair, his other hand grabbing his chin and angling it to look at Shigaraki. This is your precious little brother. My little brother? Shigaraki asked quietly. He stood from his stool and approached. Izuku was on his knees, his face being held up by All for One. Shigaraki leaned down, and gently removed the hand covering his face. I've never had a little brother before, he said. An older sister, once, but... His face contorted into a grin. Izuku whimpered. What makes him my brother? All for One laughed, his own mouth contorting into a smile that would haunt Izulu's nightmares. Well, Tamura, I've taken you on as my own. In a sense, you are my son. My eldest. Izuku here, as it turns out, is my biological child. My second son. The villains lined up across the wall all made quiet noises. Izuku couldn't even crane his neck to look at them, but they all quieted when All for One looked in their direction. Shigaraki moved closer. My very own little brother, he said with a grin. I think I can work with that. Someone to boss around. Beat up. Of course, you'll have to share things, All for One said. But you're in charge. You're going to be my symbol of fear, but Izuku here shares my gift. All for One. He also has one for all. If he were to realize his own potential, why, he could be a god, he chuckled. You'll have to show him how. Being an older brother is a lot of work. I should know, he said. We'll have to find a way to keep him safe and locked away until he's ready to submit to you. I'd like a few more words with my youngest if you don't mind, Tamura. Shigaraki pulls back and returns to his seat. Izuku was manhandled back to face All for One. He flinched back. Stop, he said quietly. I won't. You're not my father. He managed to spit out. My father is a good person. I am undoubtedly your father, Izuku, All for One said. However, I am curious to see who the man you claim to be your father is. Are you perhaps referring to All Might? He laughed. That would be something. But there is a more important matter at hand. His hand wrapped around Izuku's neck and squeezed. He winds in his grip. Who is the woman with the green hair? He asked. Lay your hand on my face, let us become one once again. And you will show me all I wish to see, Izuku. He didn't move. All for One pressed down further, and Izuku could feel his throat threaten to crack under his grip. One hand pawed at the hand around his neck fruitlessly, but his other reached up and touched that awful scared face. The grip loosened as All for One grabbed his face once again. They stood across from each other once more. Izuku and All for One. back in their minds? Or is this their quirk? Izuku didn't know. He didn't care. He wanted to run. What do you want with me? Izuku asked finally. I'm never going to bend to you, or Shigeriki's will. So why bother? Why not just kill me and be done with it? Because, All for One said, and began to step towards Izuku. You're my son. Another step. Because I know you know things. Things I want answers to. Izuku took steps back, but All for One was faster. More sure of how to walk in this space. You will show me what I want to see. I will find out where the woman with the green hair is. I will find out where the parts of me that are missing went. I will regain all that was lost to me, including you. Soft whisperings came from behind Izuku. Seems we aren't alone here. Come now, Izuku. All for One was on top of him now. Let's see what you have to hide before we can be interrupted. He grabbed Izuku's wrist, and just like in the real world, he placed it on his own face. He could feel the soft white hairs and the gentle wrinkles around his eyes. His own warm hand was placed on Izuku's head. Show me, the woman. Izuku's eyes rolled back as he was taken deeper into the darkness. Chapter 39, In the Belly of the Beast. Chapter by Roxi2Star. Trigger warning for torture. Izuku, sweetie, it's time to wake up. Mom said, gently shaking him awake. Wake up, sleepyhead. Slowly Izuku opened his eyes and smiled at her. Morning mommy. He let his eyes flutter back closed. They felt too heavy for being awake. He curled back into his All Might sheets, pulling the old stuffed bear closer to his tiny chest. Izuku's blankets were whisked off his body. Oh no, Izuku. A dastardly villain has stolen your blankets. The blanket thief. Mom took the blanket and wrapped it around herself. Who could possibly get it back? All Might can. Izuku yelled. He was already in his favorite All Might onesie after all. He pulled his hood up and jumped from the bed as his mother ran from the room. Stop, evil villain! He yelled, chasing her into the hall. Mom laughed, running slow enough that Izuku could catch up. You'll never catch the blanket thief, All Might. Izuku jumped, tackling his mother from behind. Oh! She yelled, twisting and falling on her back, Izuku sitting on her chest. You caught me, she said. Good job, baby. So she's your mother? All for One asked, his voice was disembodied. Right. This was just a memory. Izuku had only been around 4 at the time. Before Dad had come home. When it was just them and Izuku was quirkless. That must make her my lover. Good. What was her name? Tell me her name. Inko. Midoriya Inko. Izuku replied. It feels familiar. Thank you. Show me more. I want to see more of Inko. Show me something more recent. The scene changed. The apartment skipped ahead to another day. Izuku had just come in the front door, slamming it behind him. He was older here. Elementary school aged. He was crying, and his left eye was purple and bruised. Mom poked her head from the kitchen doorway. Izuku. She called before her large green eyes spotted him. Oh no. Baby, what happened? She asked, running to him and pulling him into a hug. The Izuku in the memory wrapped his arms around her waist. They could barely fit around her as he buried his face into her neck. He gave a few quiet sobs before he choked out Keikakan. He started before giving another sob. He shook his head. Why does Kakan hate me so much? I see can't he help being quirkless. Am I broken? She smoothed down the hair on the back of his head. No. Izuku baby, you're not broken. There's nothing wrong with you. She pulled back to cup his cheeks in her hands. There's nothing wrong with being quirkless. I won't lie. It's hard. People like Katsuki are going to be everywhere, she kissed his cheek. But there's something wrong with them, not you. If Katsuki picks on you, it's because there's something inside him he doesn't like. Izuku shrugged. Everyone makes fun of me though, he said softly. I wish I could do something. I wanna be a hero, but how can I be without a quirk? I know. I'm sorry honey, she frowned, and her eyes darted away. Your father sent another letter, she said. We exchanged letters? Every now and then, Why don't I have them? I think, you burned them. She sent you pictures of me. I think you did it to protect us. How do you know this? I want to see the man you call your father. Show me. Now. The world shifted again. It was dark outside, the moon shining brightly in the living room window. Izuku was on his side watching the TV. They were reporting a natural disaster not too far from Musutafu. No one was injured, but a whole block had been destroyed in the attack. The Izuku on the couch was older. 8 years old. It was early in the year, he'd be going into his next year of school soon. Mom was in the kitchen, humming softly as she did the dishes. A noise that Izuku missed dearly. He hadn't remembered she did that until now. The house was quiet. Peaceful. The Izuku on the couch seemed to only be half watching the news. He was holding a game of some kind, and quiet noises were coming from it. A sharp knock at the front door echoed in the house. That's odd, Mom said, coming out of the kitchen. Who'd be here at this hour? Izuku closed his game, and sat up straighter on the couch. It's not the neighbor again, is it? Mom shrugged. Another loud knock came. Izuku, stay there, she said and picked up a small baseball bat by the front door. She crept close to it and checked the peephole. Oh! She gasped, dropping the bat to the floor. Mom hurriedly opened the door. A man fell into her arms. He was tall, with white hair, and his face was covered in blood. His white dress shirt was tattered and had a large bright red spot on the front of it. Oh my God, Mom cried. She helped the man into the apartment and closed the door behind him. Ayinko, he croaked, clutching her. She dragged him into the living room and laid him out on the other couch. Izuku moved from one end to the other to be closer to the man. I'm sorry, he said softly. Hisashi, darling, it's okay. You're okay. She ripped his shirt open. It doesn't look bad, this can't all be your blood. Hisashi. She was crying. She leaned forward and pressed a kiss to his lips. Not caring about the blood she got all over her. Hisashi. She whispered. Izuku frowned. Mom, who is this? He asked quietly. Mom looked up at him and smiled, tears in her eyes. The man turned his head towards Izuku. His own red eyes lit up as tears formed. Is that? The man asked quietly. He was looking at Izuku as if he were something precious. Izuku, sweetie. This is your dad, she smiled impossibly wider. Hisashi, this is Izuku. Our son. Your son. She motioned for Izuku to come closer. Come here, baby. Izuku hesitated, but his father held out a large hand. It was covered in blood. Izuku slowly crawled off the couch and gently took his father's hand, as if afraid it would break. His mother laid her own soft hand over theirs. They were all smiling. That's me. But not me. It's the result of a quirk you have. Still have probably. Ah. Yes. I see. I suppose you have so many it's hard to keep track. I don't remember getting that quirk at all. But if it works by splitting memories across clones. Well, I imagine that Midoriya Hisashi has the memory of obtaining the quirk in the first place. As well as all the memories of you and Inko, I imagine. Yes. I want to see more. Show me happiness. It was summer. A street festival, little kids running around in yukatas. The smell of fried foods filled the air. Lanterns lined the streets, the sky was quickly turning from hues of reds to pitch black. The happy family of Midoriyas were standing at a shooting game stall. Dad was wearing a deep blue yukata, his hair pushed back off his face. In his hands, he held the fake wooden gun. On one side, Mom was leaning towards him wearing a mint green one with pink flowers all over it. On his other, Izuku was leaning on the counter, wearing a dark green yukata. Dad took a shot at the targets, getting a bullseye. Nice. Izuku cried. Dad shot again, getting another bullseye. The stall worker smiled. You're very good at this, sir, he said. One more bullseye and you can pick a top-shelf prize. Once more, his father lined up a shot and took it, getting the bullseye. Wow. No one has done that well all day. He said. Pick anything you like. Dad put the gun down and grinned at Izuku. What would you like, Izu? He asked, before glancing at the shelf. Let me guess, the All Might. Day. Izuku grinned, All Might is the best. You heard the kid, Dad said to the stall worker. They grabbed the large All Might plush from the top shelf and handed it to Izuku. Thank you. Izuku said. Thanks for winning this, Dad. He hugged the plush to his chest. Mom gently tugged on Dad's yukata. We should go find a nice spot. The fireworks should be starting soon, she said, and tugged them both along. There's a wall Izuku and I sit on most years. It has a lovely view. Dad smiled. I can't wait. He said, I can't remember the last time I saw fireworks like this. Really? Izuku asked. Man, your job really did keep you busy. He grabbed his dad's arm to keep them together as the three of them squeezed through the crowd. Mom had them turn the corner of the street. There was a small stone wall that a few other people were sitting on. It looked like it was pretty full though. Dad grinned and ran faster, pulling both Izuku and his mom along. Hisashi! She cried, though she was laughing. He stopped at the wall and turned to her. He grabbed her by her waist and hoisted her up onto the last free space of sitting room. Wait, what about you and Izuku? I'm plenty tall, and don't mind standing, he said, and turned to Izuku. See mere kiddo, he grabbed Izuku, who was laughing hard. He pulled him up onto his shoulders and stood in front of the wall. Comfy. Izuku was still giggling as he sat the All Might plush onto his dad's head and cradled it in his arms. Yet. Mom leaned forward and smiled. You're so cute, she told Dad, kissing his cheek. This is so wonderful. The three of us together, she said. I can't remember being this happy before. Me neither, Dad said. Got my beautiful wife, my great kid. And fireworks. As he said that, the first one shot up into the sky, exploding into a bright red firework. Another shot up as the last of the red embers dissipated, this time gold. Then two more, green and silver. Izuku squeezed his plush tighter to his chest. Dad squeezed his ankles lightly and looked up, watching the fireworks explode in his son's eyes. Wow! Izuku cried. Mom smiled and Dad smiled back at her. Inko, I love you, he said softly. He turned his head towards her. She smiled and leaned down, cupping his cheek. Hisashi, I will always love you with everything I have, she kissed him. Izuku didn't even notice as another bright firework went off above them. She looks happy. We were very happy. Midoriya Hisashi has all of these memories? Yes. It's why he's such a good person. All for One didn't speak. They simply both watched that memory stretch on in silence. Izuku wasn't sure what to think. All for One had seemed so scary. He still was. But there was something here. Something in the way he felt while watching these scenes. All for One had wanted to see his mom. How much of Mom did you remember before this? Almost nothing. I had a single memory of watching her walk away from me. You've been thinking about this for a long time, hey? 6 years. I want her back by my side. Tomura is almost ready to take my title from me, and the world shall be plunged into a new era. A society where I can rule. She will be beside me. As shall you. I'm sorry. The scene changed. It was a familiar one. Mom laying in a hospital bed. Mom, Izuku sobbed, pressing his face into her hand. I'm not ready. Oh Izuku. She said softly. She wasn't crying. He wasn't sure she could anymore. He looked up at her face. Mom was so pale. Her eyes had thick dark rings around them, her cheeks hollow. Her hair had grown back some. After they stopped the chemo treatment it had come back slowly, patchy in some spots, but Izuku still thought she was pretty. I'm so sorry baby, she whispered. His dad was on her other side, smoothing the hair out of her face. He was crying. He'd been crying for what seemed like days on end. This isn't right, he said softly. I just came back. I just got you back. Hisashi. You have to stay with Izuku, she whispered. I'm not going anywhere, Dad said. Never. You need to stay too, Mom, Izuku cried. Please. Mom only smiled, cupping his cheek. I'm never leaving you, sweetheart, she said. Even if you can't see me. I promise I'll always be with you. Both of you. She closed her eyes. I'm so tired. After that, she didn't say much. Izuku held her hand, wishing that she would stay. That he could keep her. Anything of her. He reached and reached with everything in him. Every part of his being wanting to pull her close. They stayed for a while, he and Dad. They stayed until her heart stopped. Midoriya Inko had died. She's dead. Yet. That was almost 6 years ago. Dad had only been back a few months when she died. Cancer. There was nothing anyone could do. Not even a healing quirk. They returned to the swirling vortex of their shared mind space. Izuku lowered his hand at the same time All For One did. Izuku looked up at the face of his father. He'd expected sadness, or perhaps rage. Instead he was met with a blank expression. Izuku hesitated, stepping closer. I'm sorry. He said softly. This must be very difficult. He reached out, perhaps to comfort him. Why was he doing this? This man was a monster. But, he looked like Dad. In a way, this was his father. Mom had fallen for Dad before he'd been split. Maybe there was something of the man his mom loved here too? He had memories of Izuku and his mom. He was a bad person, but no one is pure evil, right? Are you all right? All For One grabbed his wrist. His grip was tight, even here in this void. Izuku. You're like your mother, he said. Kind. Soft. He leaned down, his face blank. Tomura is going to need you. He smiled, and a chill ran down Izuku's spine. This was not his father's smile. It was too wide, curling his lips in an unpleasant way. It didn't quite reach his eyes, leaving them dull. His eyebrows were furrowed slightly. It was a hungry smile. He pulled Izuku closer in their mind space. Izuku resisted his touch, but found himself unable to pull away. He was paralyzed. All For One wrapped his arms around him in a sick pantomime of a hug. Izuku. All For One whispered in his ear, his breath ghosting along his neck. I hope you remain this soft after I'm done breaking your spirit. Izuku looked up, shaking his head. Please don't. Pain. Overwhelming pain shot through him. His eyes flickered between this space and the bar. All For One was using some type of quirk on him. Something that caused pain on contact. It was the worst thing he'd ever felt. It was like he'd taken a match to all of his nerve endings. Like his skin was being clawed off one patch at a time. Like his bones were being snapped over and over again. He screamed. He wasn't sure if he was screaming out loud or not, but that was all he could hear. His own screams and cries. Please. He yelled. Stop. He managed to get out. He fell to his knees. He tried to pull his hand away from All For One's face in the real world. If he could get himself out of the mind, maybe it would be more tolerable. His brain was burning from the inside out. He wanted to claw his own eyes out. His free hand clenched tightly. Stop. All Dad, he begged. That's right, Izuku. His voice echoed into his head. Or was that out loud too? I am your father, and you shall ask me for the things you want. Dad, please Dad. He screamed. Stop. He felt sick as his body let out another scream of sheer pain. Dad, stop. It hurts. It's supposed to feel like that, Izuku. That's how I know this is working. Dad, please. I can't. He felt like his entire body might snap in two. He was sick. He couldn't even puke. His stomach was so empty, his mind was hazing over the on edges of his consciousness. Dad, ple. Hisashi. Izuku knew that voice. Hisashi. It yelled. This one was in their head. For sure, because there was no way he wasn't let go. All For One was pushed back in the mindscape. The pain subsided. Izuku was close to passing out. A man now stood between them. He was taller than Izuku. Slim in build, with a head of soft white hair. His voice was soft and comforting. Hisashi, he said and pointed at All For One. I will not let you touch him anymore. He turned to Izuku. His eyes were a soft green. I'll do what I can, Uncle Yoichi said softly. He held up his hand towards All For One, and with a blast of wind pressure they separated. Izuku was in the bar. He fell to the ground, his face smacking into the old rug. It smelled like dirt. He panted hard, his mind felt like it was going numb. He lifted his head. All For One had stumbled back. Izuku's eyes darted to the villains against the wall. Most of them hadn't moved. Dabi was still leaning against the wall, but he'd slid down it, now on his bottom. His blue eyes wide in panic. His breathing was labored. He rocked side to side, holding his arms around himself tightly. That was a panic attack. Why was Dabi having a panic attack? Izuku looked back to All for One. He had his back turned. I'll be taking my leave, Tomura, he said. Use the quirk suppressing cuffs. Get them on him now while he's still in this state. He walked towards the exit. I'll be by again to visit the boy soon. He turned his head as he walked out. Oh, and Tomura. If you could do me a favor and look into one Midoriya Hisashi for me? It seems I have some business with him. He fixed his jacket. Goodbye Izuku. Tell my little brother goodbye as well. He stepped into a portal of mist, and he was gone. The feeling in the room changed at once. The tension in Izuku's body gave out, and he smacked back into the rug. His body still felt like it was on fire. His bones were still broken. He was so hungry. So tired. He wanted to sleep. Part of him hoped he wouldn't wake up. He couldn't face that man again. Earlier, Dabi stood against the wall, his eyes averted, just like the others. Himiko and Compress were both quivering on either side of him. The pressure All for One exuded from his body was downright oppressive. It was as if his entire aura choked you. He vaguely wondered if it was a quirk doing this. It wouldn't surprise him. That was his whole deal, right? This shadow man of the underworld, stealing quirks like tools, hoarding them like a dragon. Compress had just thrown Izuku down onto the ground a moment before. All for One stood over him where he was crumpled up on the floor. Midoriya Izuku. His voice sent a shiver down Dabi's spine. That was impressive. The fear this man could put into people with such small actions. God, what Dabi wouldn't trade to make Endeavor feel this way about him. Oh yes, All for One said softly. I was correct. How nice to see you again, Midoriya Izuku, again. This Midoriya kid and All for One had met before? Just who the hell was this little hero in training? Vaguely, he thought, who the hell was Shoto dating? Stand up. I wish to get a better look at you. He reached down and dragged Midoriya to his feet. You're much larger than the last time we met, he said. Then again, you had to have only been 4 or 5. Izuku, he began, I have many questions. Questions I believe you hold all the answers to. I'm sure All Might told you about how he defeated me. 6 years ago, he gave me a horrible injury. Of course, I gave him one in return. His hand went into Midoriya's hair, stroking it out of his face. Ever since that incident, my memories have been broken. Parts of me were spirited away. I think you know where they went. Midoriya was shaking. Dabi couldn't exactly blame the kid. Fat tears were spilling down his round face. All for One pulled his hair to make him look up. You have All for One, he said simply. Why is that? You also have one for all. His other hand trailed down Midoriya's face. What about the woman with green hair? Do you know about her? A woman? He thought this was about the fact the kid had the same quirk as him? What the actual fuck was going on? All for One laughed softly. So you do. He removed the hand from his face and used it to loosen a valve on the back of his mask. I can't be in this state for long but... A hiss of pressure, as the mask pulled away from his face. He lifted it off and placed it on the bar. Dabi recoiled slightly. He felt Himiko press against him. Man, Dabi thought his scars were bad. All for One didn't even have eyes. What the fuck? Midoriya puked onto the floor. Dabi almost could. He looked back at the ground. All for One's face made him feel itchy and sick. Not a pretty sight, yes. I know. But necessary. I'd like to try something. I dare think it shall work. He grabbed Midoriya's wrist and pulled it to his face, laying Midoriya's hand along the scar tissue. What the hell was he doing? Dabi watched through his lashes as Midoriya began to struggle. Wait. He cried out, tugging his wrist hard. Midoriya was shaking his head rapidly, more tears spilling down his face. No, he begged. All for One pressed his hand into Midoriya's face. Suddenly, they were both still. Neither moved for a long moment. Stuck standing there touching each other's faces. This had to be one of the creepiest sights Dabi had ever seen. Everything about All for One creeped him out. It was as impressive as it was disturbing. He had to admit, he almost felt bad for the kid. The way he begged like that, it reminded Dabi somewhat of himself. From a time before. Time seemed to begin again for them as All for One dropped Midoriya to the floor. The kid crumbled into a ball, sobbing violently and pulling in on himself. Dabi had done that before too. Tamura, All for One said, drawing the attention of everyone in the bar. What an incredible thing you've found for yourself here. Do you know what this boy is? Shigaraki didn't move. What is he, sensei? He asked quietly. All for One grabbed Midoriya by his hair, his other hand grabbing his chin and angling it to look at Shigaraki. This is your precious little brother. My little brother? Shigaraki asked quietly. He stood from his stool and approached. Midoriya was on his knees, his face being held up by All for One. Shigaraki leaned down, and gently removed the hand covering his face. I've never had a little brother before, he said. An older sister, once, but... His face contorted into a grin. Midoriya let out a pathetic whimper. What makes him my brother? All for One laughed, his own mouth contorting into a smile. Well, Tamura, I've taken you on as my own. In a sense, you are my son. My eldest. Izuku here, as it turns out, is my biological child. My second son. Dabi couldn't help the small noise that escaped him. Himiko covered her mouth with her hands, a small gasp escaping her. This hero kid was All for One's son? How the fuck did that happen? What kind of Star Wars bullshit was this? God, he even had the fucking helmet mask and messed up face. Shigaraki moved closer. My very own little brother, he says with a grin. I think I can work with that. Someone to boss around. Beat up. Of course, you'll have to share things, All for One said. You're in charge. You're going to be my symbol of fear, but Izuku here shares my gift. All for One. He also has one for all. If he were to realize his own potential, why, he could be a god, he chuckles. You'll have to show him how. Being an older brother is a lot of work. I should know, he said. We'll have to find a way to keep him safe and locked away until he's ready to submit to you. I'd like a few more words with my youngest if you don't mind, Tamura. Shigaraki pulled back and returned to his seat. Midoriya was manhandled back to face All for One. Stop, he said quietly. I won't. You're not my father. My father is a good person. I am undoubtedly your father, Izuku, All for One said. However, I am curious to see who the man you claim to be your father is. Are you perhaps referring to All Might? He laughed. That would be something. But there is a more important matter at hand. His hand wrapped around Midoriya's neck and squeezed. The kid whined. Who is the woman with green hair? He asked. Lay your hand on my face, let us become one once again. And you will show me all I wish to see, Izuku. Midoriya didn't move. Dabi could see the way All for One's hand squeezed down. Watched the muscles work as they slowly choked Midoriya. The kid lifted one of his hands to paw at All for One, but his other reached up and touched his face. Dabi could see his hand loosen as they once again went still. It's like someone has just stopped time. No one moved in the room. They stood there for a few seconds. There's no noise. Nothing. Everyone stared at the pair of them, transfixed. What in the world was happening? Everything about this entire situation had been confusing. They were supposed to be a league of villains who were tearing down hero society. But something about making a kid, granted he was a hero kid, a kid suffering like this felt. Dabi wasn't sure. After what felt like hours, Midoriya began to squirm. No, a better word was thrash. Midoriya began to thrash in his grip. A scream ripped from his throat before he began to beg. Please. He yelled. Stop. Midoriya's entire body was trembling, but it seemed like their bodies were glued together where their hands touched each other's faces. It was clear the kid was in pain. That All for One was torturing him. Stop. All dad. A cold panic ran down Dabi's spine. No. Not this. That's right, Izuku, All for One taunted. I am your father, and you shall ask me for the things you want. Suddenly, Dabi was reminded of a very different man. His brain supplied the image of a traditional house. The imposing figure of his father with flames on his face as he beat him for daring to come near his masterpiece. Dad, please dad! He screamed. Stop! Midoriya unleashed another ear-breaking scream of pain. Dad, stop! It hurts. It's supposed to, Izuku. That's how I know this is working. This was just like home. Dabby felt sick. His heartbeat was in his ears. He couldn't breathe. Midoriya's screaming had snuffed out the last of the air in the room. Dabby was a child again, with Endeavor standing over him. Dad, please. I can't. Dabby wanted to die. He wanted to curl up into a ball and die. Dad, ple. He slid down the wall. He couldn't hear this. He couldn't be here. Why had he come here? Why had he thought being here would be good for him? Was getting his revenge on Endeavor worth making another kid go through the same fucking treatment? He had told himself he'd do anything in order to make Endeavor suffer. He had fucking fantasies about burning his precious favorite son Shadow alive until he was little more than a pile of ashes while he made Endeavor watch. But maybe Tuya wasn't cut out for this. If watching someone be tortured while screaming for his father to stop was enough to bring him to his knees. Alright, that's where we'll leave off for the day. Thanks so much for listening along with me today. If you enjoyed, please like and comment down below and check out the video or playlist on the screen for more content from me. I look forward to seeing you next time. Ciao for now, lovelies.